What's up guys, Overdov here. In this video we're going to be talking about how first governance vote of the Arbitrum chain turned into complete mess. It's been roughly 10 days since the airdrop of the initial supply of the ARB token has been distributed. And now we have the first governance vote, so-called AIP-1, that caused a lot of backlash in the community. As you can see, currently the votes are 77% against with just 20% for. So let's dissect why that is happening. Before we dive into controversial stuff, let's read through the basic yet important. Under rationale, it states the Arbitrum Foundation serves the Arbitrum DAO by administering the wishes of the community and otherwise adhering to its guiding values. The Arbitrum Foundation and DAO governance are intended to serve as vehicle enabling impactful, transparent and fair decentralized governance by the broader Arbitrum community. So keep that part in mind. ARB token holders who make up the Arbitrum DAO play the most critical role in the proper functioning of decentralized governments in the pursuit of trustless, transparent and verifiable Arbitrum ecosystem. As Arbitrum is intended to be a public good, it is only right that governance over it should be governed by those for whom such public good is intended for. I mean, pretty standard and nice so far. But then the controversial stuff. The Arbitrum Foundation shall be permitted to issue grants out of the administrative budget wallet without undergoing a full on-chain AIP process. Such grants, special grants. The rationale behind the ability of Arbitrum Foundation to issue special grants is to avoid inundating governance with grant applications, while at the same time the special application process and criteria will be released at a later date by the Arbitrum Foundation. Then we have a bunch of stuff about council and directors, and then at the end we arrive at this passage. For the sake of operational and administrative efficiency, a separate account controlled by the Arbitrum Foundation will be created. It's called Administrative Budget Wallet. 750 million ARB tokens will be transferred to the Administrative Budget Wallet for purposes of making special grants, reimbursing applicable service providers for the total setup costs, and covering ongoing administrative and operational costs of the Arbitrum Foundation. And the further funding should require approval from Arbitrum DAO. And at that point we already started seeing some backlash from the community. Some people on Twitter started saying that team is gonna dump some tokens. Other people pointed out, and rightfully so, that none of that was actually in tokenomics in the original Arbitrum documents. But we're gonna come back to that later. And also people noted on chain that big chunk of tokens was moved. And in terms of polls, we started seeing that more people were skewing towards against in this vote. And then we get this explanatory post from Patrick McCory, and it seems like instead of making things better, it actually made it worse. So let's go through the key points in here. One acknowledgement before diving in this is that in hindsight, it's clear that the foundation definitely could have done a better job on communication, both by providing more clarity direct in AIP-1 and also by being quicker to respond. And main theme across this document, like going forward, is a lack of communication. And that may be true, but I see some other issues here. As always, I will link this document and also the AIP proposal in description so you can check it yourself. The next passage is called a chicken and an egg, and it basically states that some rules have to be implemented by centralized entity before you effectively start the DAO. And quoting the last passage here, and with regards to setting up the foundation, there were similarly lots of decisions that needed to be made ahead of time in order to get it off the ground. These include basic questions like where the foundation is domiciled, who is initial directors and employees, as well as questions about its mandate, mission, bylaws and funding. Now, of course, there is a room for discretion about what these values should have been, particularly with how much initial funding the foundation should receive. But two things that I would like to make abundantly clear in this post. First, these values were set within the sole goal of making sure that Arbitrum is positioned to succeed and compete with its peers. And second, the decisions made are well within market range when compared to Arbitrum's peer projects and foundations. Let's just go through the most important parts, in my opinion, in this document, and then I'll throw my 2 cents about some of the points that I'm being made here. The next one, that AIP-1, is ratification. Nothing here is intended to minimize that there was a very clear shortfall in communication. One of the mistakes in the drafting of AIP-1 was a failure to note and an offset that this proposal was intended to act as ratification on the initial setup of both the Arbitrum DAO and the foundation that has been created to serve the DAO. This was spelled out in the end of the section, but it should have been made clear early on. To simplify all of that, the key point here is that vote is not really a vote. The next one is, how does the Arbitrum Foundation funding compare? The establishment of the initial distribution of tokens to the foundation is a normal course of practice in setting up ecosystems like Arbitrum, and is always the intent when AIP-1 was submitted for ratification concurrently with the announcement of the Arbitrum DAO. And then they comparing themselves to the 3 closest peers, and they basically pointing out that in every case a significant portion of tokens is being allocated to the foundation. And one sentence is emphasized here. And also uniquely, the Arbitrum Foundation is the only one that ever asked the community's ratification of these decisions. I really want to comment on this now, but I'm going to restrain. Then we have the question of why not put everything on chain. And there are 2 main points here. The point number 1 is to not create voter fatigue. That basically means to not disturb voters with like little, very small things. But more important stuff, I think, is discussed here. At times, it may be in the best interest of the DAO to partner with a company or organization that either won't or doesn't have the ability to publicly negotiate deals on chain due to confidentiality and other operational requirements. And as example, they point out to Polygon's partnership with Nike and Starbucks and Optimism's partnership with a Coinbase base chain. Then they go through the documents. We're not going to go through that, but again, there are links. You can check this yourself. And again, it all comes down in their mind to the communication issues. We believe that a lot of the negative sentiment around AIP-1 was driven by confusion around the notion of AIP-1 being a ratification and not a request. For those that didn't realize that this was a ratification, they may have been surprised to see that the foundation's token has already been separated and begun to be utilized. The foundation treated this as a ratification of the initial setup, not an initial grant request from the DAO treasury, and indeed has begun to use these tokens in the interest of the DAO, including conversion of some funds into stablecoins for operational purposes. So what's interesting here right away is that they're saying that they have begun using funds. So the whole thing is weird. So you put proposal to a vote. That's not really for a vote. I don't know what's gonna happen. Like, okay, this thing, let's say it ends with like 80% against. So if that's for ratification, like, it has no effect on the initial things that are being discussed here and proposed here. Basically, the foundation just do whatever they want. In this particular case, why do you have the vote? And on top of that, they already started to move funds. And actually, after several hours of posting this article, they sort of summarized it on Twitter. And unsurprisingly, that also didn't go too well for them. Here's the link to the article. Then they sort of trying to summarize the key points in that article. But look at this. To address 2 key questions that were asked, the foundation did not sell 50 million ARB tokens. So why those were asked? Because people saw tokens being moved on chain. And the second question was obviously the rationale behind allocating 750 million ARB tokens to the foundation, but that's already been covered. Regarding the on-chain transfer of 50 million ARB tokens, 40 million ARB tokens have been allocated as a loan to a sophisticated actor in the financial market spaces. The remaining 10 million has been converted to fiat and dedicated towards operational costs. So not only they already converted 10 million tokens basically in stable coins as they outlined at the end of this post, they also lending 40 million tokens to a sophisticated actor in the financial market space. That's obviously a market maker. Who is this market maker? Like, we don't know. At least I didn't find any information on that front yet, but the consensus is that it's market maker. Okay, let's summarize the whole thing. The initial part of the token supply that sits under DAO Treasury has been split, and now basically they're saying that it was intended to be like that, but you won't be able to find it in any documents stated that DAO Treasury is not really a DAO Treasury. It's a DAO Treasury plus the foundation piece. So I think main reason for the backlash is because they didn't say upfront that they're gonna allocate tokens to the foundation. It doesn't even matter how much they're gonna allocate. When they put up the tokenomics, or even maybe after that, before the airdrop, if they would come out and say, okay guys, look, we're gonna allocate 10%, 15%, 20% of the token supply to the foundation because, you know, A, B, C, D, I don't think anybody would have the problem with that. But the way they're doing it now definitely would raise concerns to, you know, to a lot of people, because it is on paper changing the structure. Going back to what they describe as chicken and egg, they describing it as like DAO Treasury should allocate these tokens to the foundation. Like, why wouldn't you allocate this in tokenomics? Like, why shouldn't this token already be sitting there in the wallet of the foundation? Why it works like the DAO Treasury have to allocate piece of itself basically to the foundation, and this transaction is basically approved to the party who's receiving the tokens and not being approved on chain by the holders. And it's also on the same proposal that being put into the vote. I mean, I don't know if anything bad was intended here, but the way they did it is definitely, it looks sketchy. Again, I don't know, maybe they just made a mistakes in communication, in how they set it up initially, but it sure as hell looks sketchy. And it looks even more sketchy when they use sentences like this. Arbitrum is the only one that ever asks for community ratifications of these decisions. So you stating that it's a good thing? How's it a good thing? Okay, you ask for ratification. Is this ratified? How's this a good thing when you describe in your peers who stated up front that they're gonna be allocating tokens to the foundation, and you guys doing this? How is this better? Like, this sentence in bold? Seriously? Even before this vote, that again is not a vote, is completed, you started moving the funds how you deem appropriate. Again, not telling anybody what's going on. Because the whole summary of the foundation here is like, we did nothing wrong, we should have communicated this better. I guess you can look at it this way, but certainly a lot of community members are not looking at it this way. And I think rightfully so. But that's completely my subjective points of view. Like, I am not a part of the community. I never got an airdrop. I never bought the token. So again, this is just my 2 cents. I'm not trying to convince anybody here, just getting my points across. So anyways, I hope this video was helpful. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.